wonder how I'm even supposed to plug this in. Oh, hi there. Welcome to another episode of Laptop Retrospective, where today we are finally going to be looking at the gaming capabilities of the Surface Book 2. And really, this is going to be more of a showcase of just some of the different benchmarks that I've pulled down from a select few games. This is not going to be a necessarily comprehensive review, but as just with many of my other videos on how gaming feels on this particular unit. A lot of people will pick on the 13.5 inches. It only has a GTX 1050, which is significantly underpowered when you compare it to the 1060. Here's the thing though, is don't sell the 1050 short or the Intel UHD 620 that's in the tablet component of this machine, because both of these are actually pretty decent at running the majority of games that are out there. You're not going to be running your brand new open world titles at native resolution with all the settings cranked. No, but you're still going to be able to run a good variety of games that you really won't be wanting, I think, unless you are playing the latest and greatest titles on the GTX 1060, in which case that's when you start to enter the realm that there might be different machines to meet your needs other than the Surface Book 2. So without further ado, I am just going to go right into a variety of different games that I've captured footage for, and you'll hear some overlay, and yeah, just hopefully you find it as informative as my other content on this channel. So the first benchmark up on the chopping block is actually Final Fantasy XIV. And this is actually a title that performed better than I anticipated. It was set on maximum settings, running at 1080p on the Surface Book 2's display, and for simplicity's sake, I had it run in windowed mode. Now, even though this ran very, very smooth, in fact, the two times that I benchmarked this, it was either very high and extremely high for the results. This does bring up a point that other benchmarks in this video won't really stress as much, and that is the cooling of the GPU. This thing got loud. The fan definitely kicked in and was working to keep it quite cool. However, we had fan noise of approximately 60 decibels using my very low budget sound meter. So if you are playing these style of games, you're probably going to want for a good set of headphones to ensure that the experience is not negatively impacted by that. There were no hotspots on the keyboard or the tablet really to speak of. There was on the CPU area. However, the GPU remained mostly cool, and there were no adverse effects to the touch while using the keyboard or just moving my hands around the device to see if there were any hot spots. But as you can see, performance is great. So after we got pretty favorable results on this particular benchmarking tool, the historical gamer inside of me, you know, let's see what exactly a 1050 can do with one of the more historically demanding games. And I think you know what's coming next. That's right, Crysis. So this thing was dialed up to maximum settings, running full screen at the highest resolution that I could possibly get it to push for this display. And you know what? This was highly playable. I couldn't exactly tell you the frame rate, but it was smooth. There wasn't any slowdowns during any of the loading screens. This performed admirably well, and there was equal amounts of fan noise with the Final Fantasy XIV benchmark, but that being said, even with the in-game sound, I was more focused on that and less focused on the actual noise. But again, a good set of headphones is immediately going to take care of that issue. And for most of you that are mobile gaming, are going to have access to a good pair of headphones already. So, it passed the Crysis test, in my opinion, with flying colors. And hopefully, if it's running this well, it can kind of give you an idea of a generation of games that Crysis was always compared against, that this one, this 1050, with its tiny 2 gigabytes of RAM, is able to do impressively well with. So, with that being said, we can kind of close the book on this entire generation of games, almost. And let's move on to another title that people are actually still playing, that I have in my Steam library. And we will see how one of the granddaddy of online first-person shooters is doing over with CSGO. So, there's really nothing to say. This is running on the Source engine. The Source engine is not a spring chicken. This ran at ultimate settings at the native resolution of the Surface Book display with 0 problems whatsoever. There was no lag, no slowdown, no loading time issues. The fans were barely audible during the playing of this game. We were not pushing this hardware even a little bit, and it provided for a great experience. So, without further ado, we're going to salute Counter-Strike as a series and move on to another more recently rebooted series and check out its benchmark right now. So these days it wouldn't be a benchmarking video if we didn't get some Tomb Raider capture. And this was running at ultimate settings, but at a 1080p resolution. You can run this game at the native resolution of 3000 by 2000 pixels. However, you will get the average FPS of about 20. And that is when the human eye really starts to notice that slowdown. That being said, running this game at absolutely full tilt settings with 1080p produced favorable, certainly playable results. But this is where the enthusiast gamer is going to be very critical of the 1050 setup and begin to see perhaps the weakness in this particular chipset, especially at only 2 gigabytes of RAM. That being said, for the average gamer, this is going to be more than adequate to play the game comfortably on the go. And here are our numbers for this particular test at approximately 50 frames per second. Next up, we have BioShock Infinite, which is not a brand new game, but runs DirectX 11 and is a good sample for this particular generation. And this game was running at 920 by 1200 on ultimate settings, everything enabled possible. And the performance was very, very smooth to the eye. And depending on the particular scene, the results were also very, very good with minimal fan noise, really. The GPU didn't get a huge workout in this area. And the data on average was 55 frames per second and spiking all the way up to 77. And the lowest it dropped, I believe, was 53. I'll leave those stats up on the screen for your consideration there. Now for something entirely different, we are going to be playing OpenRA, particularly the Dune 2000 mod, using the touch display. Maybe it's just a childhood thing, but there were so many times that I was playing old school RTSs that I wish that I could have interacted with them more on a intimate level. Like, we wanted to touch the screen and do all that stuff as kids, and you know what? These titles easily run, easily, on the integrated Intel UHD 620 and make for a really cool experience. I certainly wouldn't recommend it to the competitive scene because the controls do certainly get some getting used to, and I couldn't quite narrow down which one I preferred more, using my finger or the pen to command and select troops. But it was actually a really enjoyable experience, and if you are a casual strategy game player that wouldn't mind, sitting on the couch with this or maybe Civilization, all of them run. Tropico, all of those games run wonderfully. So if this is actually your first touchscreen convertible or detachable, there's a whole genre of games that can be re-experienced on a very different level than what they were traditionally meant for, and it actually creates a new kind of experience that I did want to take a little bit of time to highlight toward the end of this video.
Unit ready.
Alright, well, that's going to bring it to a close for the day, but here's the real take-home message that I want to give you, is this is not a truly gaming machine, but that 1050 lets you do some gaming. And I think that's probably the best way to describe it, is almost coming a little bit into the defense of the 1050 and what it can actually achieve, and maybe a little bit of perspective on what you actually need to do some of your favorite gaming. So whether you like playing some retro titles, or if you like, your competitive first-person shooters, or if you fall into the camp of mouse and keyboard, I think that you will find that there is something that you can play on this that will definitely be entertaining and worth your time. If this is the only machine, the only computer that you will have in your household, then it might leave you wanting depending on what kind of games that you play. But there are so many different types of games out there these days with greater and greater emphasis not only on pushing graphical fidelity, but also optimization, that it makes it very challenging to simply say that unless you have the best, you can't play everything that's out there. There are certain titles that we can look at, that like PUBG and Fortnite and CSGO and Overwatch, that are some of the most popular games out there. They are not graphically demanding, really, in the greatest sense of the word, and can run over a variety of different hardware, which makes them so accessible and makes them so exciting. Anyway, I hope that this video was worth the wait, that it's given you some information that you can take and use, or maybe it's created more questions for you. If it has, I'd highly encourage you to leave those questions in the comments down below, so I can do my best to answer them, and so can the community. And once again, if you are able to show your support, I would strongly encourage you to hit that red subscribe button, presuming that YouTube has still kept it there by the time you've watched this video. And I shall see you next time.